Morning, everyone. I don't have much of an update for everyone today. I'm still going to go into a couple minutes about just where everybody should be, but I'm going to wait a couple minutes. I'll do that when I've been live for 5 minutes, giving everybody another 2 minutes and change to get into the chat. If you have any questions, post them, but the primary goal for today is answering questions for today's live stream. So if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I will start chatting about where we are in the semester for probably about 10 minutes. I'll start chatting about that in a few minutes. I want to give everyone a couple minutes to get into the stream. But make sure you throw whatever questions you might have in the chat. I'll address them one by one, as I always do. And the primary goal for today is to answer those questions. Hi, Alicia. Personality was last week. This week is about psychological disorders. There is no discussion board this week. It's exam 3 that's due this week. No discussion board this week. The only assignment due is the exam. I do expect that everybody is still looking through all the information for this week's chapter. But what I did in how I organized this week's chapter is I basically gave you a whole chapter that's in YouTube video clips. So because of that, I was able to not have an assignment directly about it, because I think as long as you're watching the video clips and looking at the PowerPoint, I think you'll be pretty confident for this week's chapter. There's not video clips on every single disorder in there, so you should be looking at the textbook a little bit as well. But there are video clips for pretty much 1 to 2 videos in every category, which ends up equaling most of the disorders that are in the chapter are covered in videos. All right, we've been live for 5 minutes, so I'm going to start by chatting about the rest of the semester, because we have less than a week left of the semester until we're done. So the rest of the semester will be as follows. For tomorrow, you have exam 3 that's due. Exam 3 is the only assignment due this week. Exam 3 is on psychological disorders, which is what this week's module is all about. On personality, which is what last week's model was all about. And on memory. Memory was covered 2 weeks ago. No, 3 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, we did the group discussions. So memory, personality, and psychological disorders are abnormal psychology. I expect that you're still looking through the chapter for abnormal psychology, and like I said, I put everything for this week mostly in video links. And additionally, I took exam questions for this exam. When it comes to the questions that are on psychological disorders, I took predominantly questions that you would see directly in those videos. A question that's talking about a symptom that was specifically mentioned in the video, kind of thing. That's not true of every single question, but two-thirds probably of the questions on psychological disorders really are covered straight in the videos. All that's due is exam 3 this week. And what's awesome for me is I actually already saw maybe 10% of people have already submitted the exam, maybe even a little more than 10%, which is great because of what is due on Monday. On Monday, you have to submit step 3 and step 4 of that common research assignment. So you have 2 assignments due on Monday, and they're 2 bigger assignments that are due on Monday. So what I really do not want to see is anyone having to do all that on Monday, like people who are waiting completely to the last minute for right now. You have 2 big assignments that are both going to be due on Monday of next week. If you haven't looked at them at all, spend today finishing the exam. Read through the module, the chapter, do the take-home exam. If you finish it today and you wait until tomorrow to submit it so you can review your answers for an hour tomorrow, then you could spend Friday, Saturday, Sunday, however much you want. I don't like to encourage anyone to have to use massive time over the weekend to do that. But you have time to focus on step 3, which is your research paper, and step 4, which is your poster. The ideal situation is that your paper is done by Sunday night. That Monday you could focus on only your poster. You need to do the paper before the poster because you need what's in the paper to put in the poster. There's a video in the module about what goes in the poster assignment, as well as what goes in the paper assignment. The paper is a little more straightforward, I think, from the questions I've gotten. I think people understand the video, what it says about the paper, and the instructions on the handout of what it says goes in the paper. Paper-wise, just remember it's 2 articles you need to talk about. Most of you guys found between 1 and 3 articles in the library session. For those who found 3, you only have to talk about 2. You can talk about the 3 if you want, but the third was there in case you realized one of your other 2 articles didn't fit very well. So it was there as a fallback in case. If you only found 1, you have to find a second article. So if you still don't have that second article, go and take care of that ASAP. You're way behind that. Paper, I don't think there's been so many questions, but if you do have questions, put them in the chat so I can talk about them. Now, the poster you write after your paper is done. And in essence, what you're doing for the poster is actually, I would say it's as simple as you are writing a research worksheet using your paper as the source instead of one of your articles you found from the library. If you remember what you did for step 2, you took an article that you read and you broke that article down to the essentials from that article. The essentials in terms of what was in the introduction, the methods, the results, the discussion. And then a little of whatever else might have needed to be in there. Like there was the questions about each one of those sections that went into there. Well, that's what you're doing for your poster. You are taking your paper and breaking it down to the essentials. So it's not a word for word representation of your paper, but all of the important information that's in your paper goes into it. So you'll have a section for your introduction, your results, your discussion, your methodology. You may have a section specifically for those 2, how those 2 articles are important together. Because remember that third part of the paper, part 1 of the paper, it's an essay, so you have an introduction and conclusion. But part 1, talk about article 1. Part 2, talk about article 2. And then part 3 is really important. It's talking about those 2 articles together. So it's comparing and contrasting, but specifically what I look for is that you talk about what makes those 2 articles important when you put them together. So when you put them together, why do they answer your bullet point question that you started at the beginning of the semester? So for your poster, you'll probably have something about the articles together as well. Now that's what goes into the poster. You can modify things as you want. You can have a slide or a section for the introduction of Article 1, and then another one for the introduction of Article 2. So you end up with 2 for the introduction, 2 for the results, 2 for the methodology, 2 for the discussion. You can do that. You can have one with both of them. You can have one slide about the articles together, or you could have 3. You can have statistics and charts and things like that. That part you choose what makes sense for your paper and your bullet points and your articles. Now, that part you have to figure out How you do it though, you have two choices. You can do it as a Prezi or as a physical poster. If you do a physical poster, you have to use an actual poster board. It doesn't have to be trifold for this. You can use any poster board. I'm not going to be picky about that. But if you want to use a physical poster, I don't want to encourage anyone to go out to a store. So if you don't have the poster board, my recommendation is to use Prezi. But if you decide you're just more comfortable using a physical poster board, you could just do a physical poster board. You take pictures of your poster. You post those pictures onto the discussion board. You're submitting this assignment on a discussion board next week, and it has to be on the discussion board. I can't accept it by email because other students need to see it. That's actually the point of the assignment, is so other people can see what you researched. Remember, that list had 15 different bullet points at the start of the semester. You chose one. Presumably other people in the class chose the other 14. I want you to be able to see some information about all of the different bullet points that we ended up researching. So it has to be on the discussion forum. The paper, obviously, I'm accepting through like email or something, but the poster I can't accept through email. If you're submitting the pictures on the discussion board, you can do them any way that you get the pictures on there. Easiest way, in my opinion, is to use a photo sharing website like Flickr or Imgur, and you just post the link. But you can also embed the images if you're tech savvy. You can attach the images. That's the least desired way to do it. But if you need to, you could. Or you can attach like a Word document with the pictures on the Word document. All of those technically work, but I think the photo sharing site is probably the best all-around choice. And if you're doing a Prezi, the big thing is it has to be Prezi, not PowerPoint or Google Slides. Prezi has templates that work very well as a poster. And if you've never seen a Prezi before, it's very intuitive. It's very easy to use. You have to sign up for an account, but that account is free. Don't choose the pay option. Make sure you choose the free choice. The account is free. It gives you a good amount of templates that you can use, and they're really good animations that are all built in. It's really easy to add whatever you want, pictures and things like that to it. And what you'll end up having is you can actually end up with something that when we click on your link, it actually will look like a poster board. And then as you click through the presentation, it will zoom in on the different slides of the poster board. Prezi works really well for this, so that's why I require it to be Prezi. Whereas PowerPoint, it's just like a continuous thing. It feels a lot better when you're thinking of it in terms of it being a poster board with Prezi. It really does. You submit both the paper, and I less than a minute left, and then I'm going to get to the questions that are in chat. I haven't read Taylor and Keith. I haven't read them yet. You submit the paper through just an assignment on Canvas on Monday. You submit your poster on the discussion board on Monday. On Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, you have something due each one of those days, but it's a smaller thing. On Tuesday, you're going to reply to 2 classmates on the discussion board, and that's the same as what we've been doing on all of these discussion boards. More than one sentence, you're contributing something. Specifically, I want you to ask questions to the person's poster that you are answering their thread of. Ask them questions about their poster. And then on Wednesday, you just have to go in and answer the questions that you were asked on your specific poster. Every question you're asked should be in by Tuesday, so anytime on Wednesday should be fine. Only for the poster presentation, the deadlines are going to be strict, that the questions have to be submitted. You could submit some on Monday, I'm okay with that, but I won't accept them on Wednesday. The lateness on Wednesday, I won't accept them for credit, because Wednesday is the last day of the semester. I want the whole day dedicated to answering the questions you were asked. Tuesday, you're replying to 2 different classmates and you're reading through everyone's poster. It'll probably take you half an hour. And on Wednesday, you're answering the questions you were asked. It'll take you probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I would say, at the absolute most. So the heavy deadlines, what's due on Monday, is the big things. The poster and the paper are a substantial amount of work. Don't wait till the last minute to cover them. Okay, that's all I needed to introduce. Let me get to questions, and the rest of today is for answering questions. Good morning, Taylor. When it comes to direct quotes, the recommendation always is keep them to a minimum. the biggest difference between a strong college writer and a person who got A's and B's in high school but isn't necessarily the strongest college writer is probably in quotes. People a lot of times come into college from high school and they think quotes are a good thing. Quotes do not do you service. You should be quoting for one of two reasons only. If you cannot change the words of a quote because the words themselves, the ordering of them is really important, or what also happens in practice, if we're being honest, sometimes you just can't think of how to paraphrase something, then yeah, put a quote. Um, with other than that reason, really, other than when you need it because it's important to have it word for word there, or you can't think of how to change it, you really should not be quoting. It is so much better to paraphrase your work. So if you are going to have quotes, that's okay, but keep them to a minimum. Um, if you have more than 3 quotes in this paper, you're quoting too much. I can pretty confidently say that it's not a long paper. 3 quotes would definitely be what I would probably say is a good maximum to have. Realistically, you probably shouldn't have more than one. Um, and you definitely should be in-text citing, and that format that you mentioned is absolutely enough. In-text citations would be author, the last name of the author or authors, and the year. You are allowed with APA format to put last name, comma, year, comma, page number. I'm sorry, let me say that again because I said it wrong. Last name, comma, year, comma, page number. The newest adaptation of APA allows for that to happen. I consider it a choice between the two ways that you cite them. So either one is fine with me. But I definitely do want to see an in-text citation after a quote, as well as after you paraphrase something. And let me know if I didn't answer that. I'll get down. I see you have another comment as I scroll down. Okay, that's about the abstract, so I'll get to that. Let me get to Keith's question first. All right, so Keith, if you mean the intro being like what template, that's completely up to you. Choose a template that looks like it would serve as a poster board. So something that you can be zoomed out and see everything of, and then it'll zoom into each individual place on it. There's like a wheel and spokes one, I think is the name of the template that works really well for that. But they update their templates that they give you for free a lot, so that might not still be there. Just use your own judgment on whatever template you think will look well. There's a lot of them. I mean, it can look like it could look just like a tic-tac-toe board where they zoom into the different squares. That would serve fine. As far as the introduction, on the introduction like square, basically answer the same questions that were in the research worksheet under the introduction. So what were the articles about? What was the intention of the researchers with the article? Things like that. Because this is a poster based off of answering a discussion question, you could have your bullet point in the introduction as well. For the most part, use your own judgment. I can load up the research worksheet to talk about each specific question that are on there, but those are the questions that you should be answering. Okay, Adila, I will, after I get through everyone's question, and I'll talk about the poster and what goes in it in more detail. And Taylor. Oh, okay. It took me a second to understand that question. Absolutely, Taylor. So as far as the 3 pages of content that are required, so the actual essay, the abstract is not included in that. Your title page, your abstract page, and your reference page do not count towards your 3 pages of your formal essay. As far as 5 paragraphs, I wouldn't say that. I don't think that you're required to only have 5 paragraphs. Use whatever makes sense here. You'll have at least 5 though. So you'll have your title page, your abstract page, and on the template that I have for you on that document on Canvas, it tells you what goes in the abstract. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because that's actually more descriptive than it needed to be of what goes in the abstract page. It's basically just a 1 to 2 paragraph summary of what your paper is about. So I do recommend that you write your paper before you write your abstract page. After you get into your paper, it's a 3-page paper, so you'll have at least 5 paragraphs. So what I would expect to see is a paragraph for an introduction, a paragraph for what was in Article 2, a paragraph for what was in Article 1, introduction, Article 1, Article 2. I don't know why I said 2 first. A 4 will be what makes those articles important together, and paragraph 5 will be a conclusion. So at minimum 5. Whatever you think makes sense beyond that, though. You might want to have more than 1 paragraph on Article 1. You might want to have more than 1 paragraph on Article 2. And what I think I might see for a good amount of you is you might end up with 2 paragraphs for talking about the articles together. You might have a paragraph that talks about why those 2 articles together answer your bullet point, and a paragraph more or less comparing and contrasting them. All of that, use your own judgment. If you end up combining them, that's okay. Just use your own judgment. If it makes more sense to have them separate, I would have them separate. If you found that Article 1 has a lot more value than Article 2 does to answer your question, and you wanted to have more detail and you needed 2 paragraphs to do that, by all means you can. So I don't want you to think that it has to have 5 paragraphs, but what I will say is at the minimum, it would have 5 paragraphs. When you write the name of the article, are you talking about in a reference, or are you talking about on the title page? Or are you talking about like just mentioning the title of the article inside the paper? So what I would probably say here is, actually, let me look that up really quick. I'm not 100% sure if that's in italics or what. Let me take a quick peek. Quotation marks. If you're using if you're talking about articles, which is for this one, it'll be quotation marks, and if you were doing it from a book, it would be italics. Glad I looked that up because I actually had those 2 reversed. So put it in quotation marks. Even I have to double check things every once in a while in APA format. It's actually why I know I had mentioned this in the classroom, but I would have mentioned this again in the classroom. APA quick guides are the best thing in the world. Just on Google, you type in APA quick guide, and there's 10 good ones that come up at the top of the page. I use the one from the Penn State Library personally, but they all are good. Every once in a while, I have times that I don't actually remember exactly how something works in APA format, and I just actually have to look it up. Like, for example, I was writing something last year, and I had to remember how to cite something with no author. And I didn't remember how to do that because I don't have to do that very often. I do that all the time. When you need to, you just go back and check things up. And my memory, when it comes to things like that, my memory can be a little limited, so I have to use that quite a bit, actually. The MLA and APA format are so similar. The students get so concerned about it. The only difference in terms of functionality of them is APA prioritizes the date something was published, because subjects that use APA are the subjects like sciences where things get outdated very quickly. Something can be completely replaced in 2 years. And pieces of work that are more timeless, use MLA format, because timeless is more about where specifically did you find that in the book, for example, what page number. And those tend to be the subjects that the works are timeless. So English, history, things like that, that'll use MLA. They're not very different. It's really just how they prioritize information. There's not a big difference between the two. It's always better to put something in your own words, but if there's something specific to the results that you're talking about, then just put them in quotation marks. If it's a specific equation, you can italicize them, but I don't think that anybody's going to be using, for this purpose, I don't think that the specific data is going to be something that you're using very much. So I would most certainly think that, to answer your question, Keith, I would most certainly think that if you can put it into your own words and like the explanation of the result, do so. But if the specific wording that they use is important, which that's definitely a place where it could be, that's where I would just put them in quotes. You'll put the first author and then the words et al. Taylor. So you just look that up on a APA quick guide. It's really easy. That's a very common thing when it comes to citations. That's actually very, very common, is that you see articles that have lots of contributions that end up with you finish the citation as et al, et space al. And that basically says that there's more people involved in there. And that would be talking about the citation for them. Okay, keep throwing questions if you have it. Let me chat about the poster a little bit more. For Adila, if you have other questions, throw them in chat. I suspect that a lot of you guys that are here aren't going to be upset about hearing a little bit more about the poster, but if you have no more questions, feel free to jump out of the chat. On Monday, I will have my last live stream for you all. And on Monday, we'll be talking about the paper, the poster. I mentioned on Monday, I mentioned the takeaways that I have for the class. The second one that I mentioned, I want to mention one more time on Monday. And that'll be Monday's plan. But for today, it's just answering questions that you guys might have. Make sure you're doing some work and thinking about things as you can. So Adila, first thing that you need to make sure you've done is watch the video where I talk about the paper and the poster. Second thing that you need to make sure you've done is load the actual document for the poster up. Assuming that you've taken a look at both of those two things, then it's really just me explaining information from the poster. You have to make a choice between using the poster board or using Prezi. That I leave up to you completely. And you should have your paper finished before you start writing your poster up. But when you're deciding on what goes into your poster, well, one thing that's very helpful is on the document that I have that's just a PDF, it has some examples. So a lot of people, probably this semester, almost everyone, are just going to use those examples and mimic them. That's a template. That's what you put onto it, and just putting that same kind of information on there. So if you haven't looked at that document, make sure you do. That'll definitely be, I would say, the first thing you should probably do after you leave here is look at that. / also, if you didn't watch that YouTube video I had, but I think I remember us chatting in email that you have watched that video. So you have a template up there. You're basically just mimicking my own words. The way I always describe this poster is that you are taking your paper, you are breaking your paper down to the nuts and bolts, or the essentials, the really important things in your paper, and you're putting those on the poster. So I describe it as if you're writing a research worksheet using your paper as the source. Because in the research worksheet, that's exactly what you did. You took an article you read and you broke it down to the nuts and bolts, the essentials. And that was just guided in terms of the essentials from the introduction, from the methodology, from the results, and from the discussion. And that's basically what you're doing. Now, in your poster, you don't have to label them as introduction, method, results, discussion. You can organize them however you want. I don't require them being organized that way. It might be easier if you do it that way. But what I need to see is all of the important information. So you're going to have all of the information about Article 1, about Article 2, and about the two articles when you put them together, just like you have in the paper. You're going to have all of those questions answered and put on the poster and organized however you think makes sense. I think most of you will find it easiest to organize them in terms of introduction, methodology, results, discussion, and then maybe have two slides about putting the articles together. I think that'll probably be the easiest for you all. But if you think that there's a way that's better, by all means do that. As long as your poster takes what's in your paper and breaks it down. So you have not a word for word representation of your paper, because that would be too much to read. As long as you are breaking down what was in your paper, putting it on the poster, and then that's what everyone sees, that's perfect. If the rule of thumb is actually really simple. If you look at your poster when it's done and you would say it would take someone longer than 2 minutes to get through all of the information on your poster, you have too much information on it. If you look at your poster when it's finished and you say it would take someone less than 60 seconds to get through everything on your poster, then you don't have enough on your poster. Everyone should look at your poster and it should take them 1 to 2 minutes to get through everything on there. And that's the purpose of the poster discussion board. You started with a question, maybe, can exercise fight depression? And someone else started with a question about helicopter parents. Well, you didn't research that. So you should be able to click on their link and you should be able to, in 1 to 2 minutes, learn about helicopter parents or learn about social media and the impact on our youth, or learn about intelligence in animals, or whatever other bullet points people chose. You should be able to, in 1 to 2 minutes, learn about each one of those other bullet points as you click through the other people's forums. So when you're writing your poster, if you look at it, the finished product, and you would say, okay, this looks really good, but it's going to take someone 5 minutes to get through. It's too much. You should be simplifying some things. And if you look at it and it's 4 slides with 2 sentences on each one, that it's going to take someone 30 seconds to get through it, there's not enough. Keith, if you would say 3 minutes, I would probably say it's okay. But if you're saying it's 3 minutes or longer, I would probably cut a little bit. If you're saying it's going to take like 2 to 3 minutes, I think it's fine. But if you're saying it's going to take 3 or 3+ minutes, you might want to cut just a little bit, maybe simplify a couple things. You might, what a lot of people come into, because the templates, the way I would describe them is that's the most content I would want to see you have. I always am cautious about saying that phrase, because that doesn't mean I want a lot less. I would use that or a little bit less. And I think what a lot of people might do on their prezzies is they might end up just with 3 sentences of detail when 1 sentence would do for something, or 2 sentences would do for something. You might be able to cut a sentence out, is basically my point. Use your own judgment. I'm not going to sit there and time on a stopwatch how long it takes me to get through. But if I look at a poster and I say that's just not enough information, then that's a bad thing. And if there's just way too much information, that's also a bad thing. But I'm not going to sit there with the stopwatch, just like I said with the discussion. I don't sit there and count each individual word. Depends, Keith. If you have a chart on your poster that is interest-catching and pretty self-explanatory, you could probably get by without explaining it. But if you have a chart that people wouldn't understand without explaining it, just on the bottom of that, put a little explanation, for sure. So if you have a chart in there that was important for the data that they had, I would probably have a sentence or two explaining it. But if you have a chart in there that you kind of put because it just was interest catching for the bullet point you started with, it might be self-explanatory. Use your own judgment. It also could be something that you explain in the PowerPoint slide for results, that you have it kind of in the middle as a interest catching thing, and you explain it just in the results section. That can happen too. But if it's something that needs an explanation, you're not planning on talking about it in your results section, if it needs to be explained, just put it on the bottom of the slide really quick, a short explanation. If it's a brain scan, if you're using like an fMRI or an MRI, maybe just have a little like text box, little footnote underneath it that just explains very briefly what it is. For the poster, yeah, the PDF that I have up for you guys, it gives you a couple of ideas on just like template what they should look like. And then it gives you a couple of finished products of what they should look like. Just basically do it just like that. As long as you all put in the effort to the poster, I think you'll do well on the poster. I mentioned this before, but like the research worksheet, the poster is not something I'm going to grade strict. The poster's purpose is so that other people can learn about the bullet point you research. So as long as I look at your poster and I think it's informative, so it's not something you just kind of rushed through. If I think it's informative for your bullet point, I think you're going to do really well. You still have to make sure that you answer the question, you ask questions to other people's forums and answer the questions asked on your own for the poster. Because the poster itself is only 60% of your grade for that grade. But I think I would be surprised if I don't give every single person at least 50 out of 60 on their poster. And then as long as you answer the questions and ask the questions that I mentioned, I would be surprised if anyone in this class gets less than a 90 is the big point to that. It's the paper that will have the distribution of grades. The paper, I follow a rubric very strictly for. The rubric's available for you guys on the handout. And that's where, your strength of writing, what your research is, how well you understood the research, all of that factors into your grade. There'll be a distribution of grades there, but there really shouldn't be too big of a distribution of grades on the poster, as long as you take it seriously. Inevitably, there might be someone who doesn't take the poster very seriously that does poorly because they did that. Taylor, very rarely do I offer extra credit. And this semester, I'm really not, because what I'm doing for this semester is everything since we've gone online, with the exception of the group discussion week that we did the discussions on the articles. Everything except for that one discussion board, I'm still accepting late. And I guess exam 2, I'm not still accepting late. I was accepting it late a little bit after the exam, but not still. So I'm basically, if you need to redo an assignment, like you did poorly on the personality assignment or something, you could still resubmit the assignment to me. So I'm really not doing extra credit because I still have the assignments allowed to, resubmit them, or if you haven't submitted them, to submit them. If you happen to have done every single assignment and you just did very poorly on one, so for example, maybe you did really bad on exam 1, but you did every other assignment and you did well on every other assignment, you could shoot me an email and we can take a look at how that works. Usually when I see that, like if I see that you are getting a B+ because you got a 50 on an exam, but you ended up with pretty much an A on every other assignment, I'll probably round you up to an A- or be willing to offer you a small extra credit assignment to get you up to the A-. But that I'm only going to do if it's because one assignment brought your grade down significantly, not if it's just that you had a lot of C assignments and you had a lot of A assignments, kind of thing. So case by case basis maybe is something for extra credit, but for the most part, if you see an assignment that was done since we switched online that you did poorly on, you want to resubmit it. For the most part, I'm going to allow you to resubmit that assignment, and that'll basically work as the extra credit. Adila, I don't understand your question there. Are you asking if the paper is different than the poster? I'm not sure what you're asking. If to qualify for something at the very end of the semester for extra credit, you would have to have, let's say, exam one be, let's say, like a 50. And then you submitted every other assignment, so I wouldn't consider it if you had a 0 on an assignment, and you did really well on every other assignment. So you had like A's pretty much on every other assignment. Like if you had 187 or something, that'd be fine. I will approach it if your grade is being pulled down just because of one assignment, I always will approach something with you, because you could have just had a bad day. But it's all on case by case basis, and I do that after I grade papers. So after I grade all of your assignments, I will post an announcement that says to you that your grades are up. Take a look at them, and then I'm going to officially post them. Usually I'll say 24 hours, but depending on how quick I get a class's grades up, I might say they're going to post in 48 hours. And you can take a look at your grades in that 24 to 48 hour window. And let's say you saw that your grade was an 88.8. So it's a point away from a 90, and it's only that low because of one grade. As long as you didn't miss other assignments, if it's only low because of one grade, I'm willing to work with you. It might be something that I just round you up naturally. Because I like to personally factor in that someone could have just had a bad day if they only had one poor assignment. But if you end up with a situation where you need a point and I wasn't going to round you up, then I might be willing to do something extra credit for the point. And do also keep in mind that everyone has, well, not everyone, but a lot of you have extra credit at the end of the semester already. Discussion board, where you either have 1 or 2 points that'll go at the end of your semester. So Taylor, like you said, for a 91, if you have the 2 points for that, that would be a 93. So that already could be an A. Taylor, talk to me at the end of the semester if you have a situation like that. And I always approach them case by case. If you're 2 points short of an A minus becoming an A, and it's because of one assignment, I still would be willing to consider it. Like I said, my big thing always when it comes to grading is I understand that someone could have had one bad assignment because they had one bad day. It's just a matter of if it's just one, I don't want that to hold someone back. But if it's multiple, if you're missing assignments that you just didn't submit, or if you every single exam you got like a 70 on every single exam, then it's a little bit more consistent. But if it's just one assignment, I always will factor that in and be willing to approach a dialogue about where we should how we should deal with that. But in terms of right now, if you're looking for improving your grade right now, the way to do that would be if you missed an assignment that was on the online portion since the coronavirus switched us online, you can still submit everything except for the article discussion board. It's the only one I'm not accepting late. So everything past exam 2, with the exception of that article discussion board. But you could still submit the regular memory discussion board, the regular social discussion board, the personality assignment. You could still submit those or redo those assignments if you needed. And then at the end of the semester, that's when we will approach if you're very close to a grade and it's because of one assignment pulling you down. And also, I do naturally round up. So if your grade is like an 89.5, I naturally would round that up. to an A minus. Even if your grade was an 89.45, I would actually round that up to an A minus. Oh, for the movie poster? Okay, so I actually only had 3 or 4 students submit that, so I didn't realize that's what you were talking about, Adila. If you did do the movie research poster, you're doing a very similar thing for the final poster. You're using a poster board. It's just the specifics of what go on the poster board is a little different. Make sure you follow the step 4 PDF for what goes on this poster board, because you're not doing it based off of a movie. You're doing it based off of 2 other articles that you found for your research. So the specifics that go in it are definitely different, but it's the same type of assignment where you have a poster board and you're putting information on that poster board. You were very, very welcome. Apologies for not understanding. I wouldn't have put together that that's what you were talking about, because very few people submitted it. I just wouldn't have thought that you're one that submitted it. I don't remember the 3 or 4 that did. Anyone else have any questions? For the most part, yeah. If I'm being honest, Keith, when I start to grade too many of them all at once, then they start to wear on me, because they're a lot of the type of thing that's very hard to just read in succession. So I do enjoy reading them, but I can't grade too many of them at once. So what I actually did is I made a mistake on my expectations on how quick I can get them graded. I actually am still not finished grading all of them. So I thought that I would be finished with almost all of them yesterday. But I still have, throughout the day, I'll still be having to grade them. So I enjoyed the assignments, but I'm not enjoying that I'm still grading them, because I can only do about maybe 15 at a time. So I have mixed emotions about the assignment, but the negative part has nothing to do with you guys and your assignments. It's just that I can't grade too many of them all at once because of how they are. So the assignments, though, have been enjoyable. You can email me. You can send me a message on Snapchat. If you need to actually chat, we can always schedule times to chat over the phone, or over Zoom, or over text message, or over this. I actually have done that different ways with many different students. So if we need to actually have a one-on-one invested conversation, email me and we can figure out how to do that, Taylor. Like I said, I've talking over the phone. I've talked over Zoom. Even texting a little bit, but I try to avoid that because that's no different than emailing to me. But if you just have a question, emailing it to me, or Snapchat, either one works. It's prof.gagliano, prof.gagliano. Or you can just, if you load up the syllabus, it's on the first page of the syllabus as well. Adila, what do you mean any day or a specific day? For chatting, everything outside of email and Snapchat that I do has to be scheduled. So if you want to chat over the phone or something, it needs to be scheduled because my calendar ends up very full. So I always schedule, depending on what the need is, either a 15-minute or a 30-minute block with you. But we have to schedule that. It's not something you could just be like if we exchange phone numbers, if you just called me, there's virtually no chance that I'm just going to be available when you call me. It definitely has to be something that we schedule. Oh, there's a little bit more of a chance now because the demands of switching online have calmed down as the semester has gone on. The first 3 weeks where my job basically became a very, very long work week. But now at least that things have calmed down, so everyone started to understand the expectations, so I don't get quite as many emails every single day. Now I've settled into pretty much a normal 40-hour work week. But for quite a while of this, everything had to be completely scheduled. It was chaos. So at least now, if you like send me a message, I should be able to touch base with you that day. Maybe we could talk over the phone. But it's always easier to just do it through email or Snapchat if you have like shorter questions. I mean, I'm on my email all day, pretty much every day. I do take the weekends off of my email though. That's the only thing. This weekend, since you have assignments due on Monday, I'll check it a couple times, but I'm not going to be regularly on my email like I am during the week. Correct. So schizophrenia has a genetic disposition to it, meaning that you have the gene or you don't. But you also have to have it onset. The onset is triggered, just like you mentioned, Keith, by stressors. So what that means is if you are an identical twin, you share the same genome. So if something was completely genetic, it's either you have it or you don't. Well, then if one identical twin has it, the other one would have to have it. And that is true for the genetic disposition of schizophrenia. But the reason why one identical twin could end up onsetting schizophrenia and the other one might not is because it is the onset of it is triggered by a stressor event, an extreme event, usually of an impending and strong amount of stress that causes the break of it onsetting. And then basically it's like flicking a light switch on. Once it's on, it would be on. Schizophrenia has a lot more to it. So there is a strong genetic basis to it. It is more common in men than women, and the average age that it onsets. So like childhood schizophrenia compared to adulthood schizophrenia can be very different, and adulthood schizophrenia has specific age ranges that it typically would onset for men compared to women. So there's a lot more about the triggers of it onsetting. But it does have a genetic basis. We do know that there is genetic to it. So that would mean that if one identical twin has it, it does mean that the second one has the gene for it. But what we see, because identical twins share the same genome, so that would say that if one has it, the other one has it for a genetic disorder. But what we see is what we need is the onset of it. And the onset is triggered by an extreme stressor. If anybody else has any questions, make sure you're jotting them in chat. I'm not rushing out of here for a few more minutes. I'm going to get some lunch probably in 5 or 10 minutes. But I will be back here at 1:30. If you have any more questions or want to jump back in to see what else we end up chatting about, I expect it'll be very similar to this one for today's late one. I don't think that we'll end up talking about anything different than we did in the early live stream for today. But if you want to jump into that at 1:30, we'll be talking about paper and poster and the exam one more time, when they're due and things like that. That would be why. I mean, and it's more common in adults. The average age of onset is a little bit later. So what that means is even if you have the disposition for it, childhood schizophrenia is a little rare in that sense. And I don't want to say that confidently because I haven't confirmed that. But I believe it actually functions slightly differently. But I'd have to confirm that for childhood schizophrenia. But it's more common to onset in adulthood than it would be. And I don't know if it's a recessive allele or not. So that's I'm not an expert on the specific disorder. So there definitely be more to do. There's also different types of schizophrenia, like we're mentioning in the chapter for this week. So it's not only paranoid. Everyone typically jumps to paranoid schizophrenia when you think of schizophrenia, because that typically is what you see represented in movies that cover schizophrenia. But there are other types of schizophrenia as well. And there also is varying levels of severity with schizophrenia. That's the big thing for this week's chapter that I mentioned in the video. Someone can have schizophrenia and it could be mild. Another person can have it and it's severe. They're still diagnosed with the same disorder. But there is definitely a difference in the severity of schizophrenia is a great example of that, of the disorder. Someone could be diagnosed with schizophrenia and other than maybe once a year having a hallucination, they might not exhibit symptoms that you would really be able to know that they had the disorder. Someone else could suffer from them daily. Um, what was your bullet point, Taylor? It's not an ideal article if it's using rats and not humans, but um, maybe. What's your bullet point? That's what I thought your bullet point would be. Not ideal because when you're looking at rats, it doesn't guarantee. But if your second article is really strong off of it, and you're using that kind of as the a little bit more of the early stages of we see addiction can start here. It's triggered at this part of the brain because when you're studying animals and we're able to do things obviously that we can't. I mean, it does definitely border on some being unfair and inhumane with animal rights of something like just dissecting a brain. But if your second article is really good, I think you'll be okay. If you do have a third article and you want to like maybe just use something from that article that's a little bit more to addiction on humans, even if you don't focus on it, that might work really well. So I think you're okay as long as your second article really focuses on this with humans as opposed to maybe just focusing on a specific drug. Maybe this focuses more on just the just how addiction works on humans. We can get addicted to quite many things. Sugar is certainly one of them. Unfortunately, my one addiction that I have that I've never been able to shake is I am addicted to soda. I cannot get out of that soda sugar addiction myself. Um, Without really reading through the article, then I'm not going to be able to say yay or nay for the second article. If your article is exclusively looking at adolescence, you might want to focus your whole paper off of adolescence. How do adolescents get addicted to drugs? Because if all you have is children or adolescents, whichever your article would go into, if you don't have any participants that are adults, you might not want to go that direction. But that could be a place where you have that third article that's about adults that you kind of just you don't really specifically go into detail about it, but you use that just to kind of talk about the similarities of addiction across age groups. Use your own judgment, Taylor. I'm not overly strict about this. Like I said, this is something that I want you all to get the practice doing a literature review and writing research. So some of those, I don't want to say mistakes, but some of those choices that you make, if it's not the best choice, I just want you to basically see where, okay, I kind of needed something a little bit more comprehensive than that. You are welcome. I don't want you guys to I don't expect to be reading very many perfect papers. I do expect to be seeing effort in following what I want you to do, but I'm sure there's going to be quite a few people who are going to have some research that has a significant limitation, for example. So for you, it might be that you don't have enough on studying humans or specific age ranges. Someone else might be taking some research that they didn't realize it, but it's actually a little outdated. Even finding something within 5 years. Let's say someone found something from 2016. Well, that piece of research from 2016 could already be outdated still. So I expect to see a lot of little things like that. That's the growing pains of learning how to write college level academic research and then how to do a literature review. Okay, so if you have any other questions, throw them in chat. I'm not going to sign off just yet, but I am going to start making myself some lunch in just a minute. So I am really quickly going to drop off my coffee mug into the kitchen. I'll step back to see if there's any other questions, but if there's not, I'm going to log off for about 50 minutes, and then I'll be back to do this again at 1:30. All right, so I will be right back to see if you still do have any questions. Okay, I don't see any other questions, and I am hungry, so I'm going to log off for a few. I'm going to grab some lunch, and I'll be back here in about 50 minutes, and we'll see you at 1:30 if you want to join then.